What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And today, I'm joined by one of the legends of the journalism game, someone who has covered the NBA for nearly 15 years straight as a part of the Boston Globe, joining us all the way from Paris, France, as he covers the Olympics. Gary Washburn. How's Paris treating you, Gary?
So far, so good. I'm in Lille, which is a suburb, which is where they're playing basketball for the first for the group stage. So I haven't really been to Paris much. I've been kind of in a suburb. It's a really nice, cool, actually, city here. Getting used to it. I've been here like 5 days now. So yeah, it's been fun. The games officially kick off. Opening ceremonies on Friday night, and then Olympic basketball begins on Saturday, so it should be a fun time.
Of course. And talking about you covering the Olympics, I mean, you guys got a couple of players there from the Boston Celtics, so it's not too many faces that you haven't seen. But speaking of your experience, so obviously I had to do my research coming into this interview, and I'm known as a baseball guy, even though I cover the Cavs for cleveland.com. But I recently came across the fact that you began your career covering the LA Clippers for 5 years with the Los Angeles Daily News, and then you covered baseball for nearly 8 years, chronicling the Oakland Athletics and the Baltimore Orioles, my hometown team, before coming back to the world of basketball to cover the Seattle Supersonics for 3 years, getting to cover the first 2 seasons of Kevin Durant's career and the change of the city from Seattle to Oklahoma City before going to the Boston Globe. Can you tell us a little bit more about how and why you jumped sports a couple of times and why you returned to basketball?
I was told as a younger reporter that if you could do baseball, you could do anything. When I covered the Clippers, it was many moons ago, and they were not a very good organization. They were a mess. So there wasn't a lot of interest in LA. This was during the Kobe Shaq time in LA. The Clippers were kind of obviously the stepchild. They pretty much still are, but it was even worse then because they weren't successful. They didn't have a lot of deep playoff runs. So I changed papers because my paper in LA had stopped traveling with the Clippers. It wasn't a priority. So when I got to the Contra Costa Times, they offered me the A's beat in the middle of the season of the 98 season. And I was told, hey, if you do baseball, you'll be able to do anything. And I do think that's true. So I got into baseball, covered the A's 4 seasons, and then the Orioles for 4 seasons. I always wanted to do the NBA again. But I did learn to love covering baseball. I was a baseball fan as much as I was a basketball and football fan growing up. You know, I grew up in Los Angeles. So I was a big Dodgers fan. So I knew the game. I had to learn a lot more about the game as I covered it than just being a casual fan. But I always knew I wanted to return to cover the NBA. I really had a good time doing that. So in 2006, the Post-Intelligencer job, or 2005, the Post-Intelligencer job covering the Sonics opened up, and I decided I wanted to delve back into doing basketball.
I mean, that's what people say, right? If you do baseball, you can go ahead and do basketball or any other sport. It's kind of 182 games in a season. you get a lot of different experiences and things of that nature. But Gary, I mean, obviously you've covered a lot of different aspects of multiple sports. You've had experiences covering some of the best in baseball and in basketball. Can you give us a story or something that you experienced that is memorable for you to this day, even if it's something that you told on your own?
I think, when you're younger and you are meeting people that you admire, boyhood heroes, when you're in your 20s and you're meeting, people that are 30 and 40 years older than you that are still related to the game, former players, managers, coaches. That was always a thrill. And you had to keep your composure. Uh, I covered a coach. The first coach I covered in the NBA was named Bill Fitch, who actually coached the Cavs in the 1970s. He led them to the playoffs. I think it's like the Miracle at Richfield or something at Richfield, the old arena in Cleveland, in Richfield, Ohio. And I think they won the Central Division that year. And I covered him, and he was in his 60s, and I was in my 20s. And it was just an experience to be around somebody who was old enough to be essentially my grandfather, and you're covering him, and you're trying to get to know him as a person. You're trying to have him respect you because you're so much considerably younger than he is, and he kind of could look at you like a little squirt or a little punk or something. And so it's just gaining the respect of those players, meeting, when I covered baseball, Tommy Lasorda, the old Dodgers manager who I grew up idolizing, or meeting a pitcher named Don Newcomb, who was before my time, but one of the first real power black pitchers in the history of baseball, and meeting these gentlemen of the game and being like trying to take it all in and not being, not understanding the moment, understanding the gravity of the moment in terms of just like how big this is and how they might not be around much longer. So you appreciate when you met them or shook their hand or you had a conversation. I mean, that's the one thing I take from early in my career was there were a lot of guys who were still around who have since passed, and you got to meet them, maybe sometimes have a drink with them at a bar or a restaurant, or have a conversation with them, and you're pinching yourself, and you're like, wow, I can't believe it. But that's the field that we're in. We get to meet our heroes, and sometimes our heroes are better than we think, and sometimes they're not as good. But I just think meeting amazing athletes, people I grew up idolizing, people I grew up, wanting to be like or seeing on television, and then seeing them in person, that was probably the one of the big thrills early in my career. And it's still that way now. A lot of the guys now, you're either their same age or it might be even a little older, or some of the folks that are older than you, it's more like an even friendship. They're not looking at you like you're a kid anymore, because I'm not, obviously. So the dynamics of the friendships change when you get older. It's more of a peer kind of thing. And Ethan, eventually, and it's going to be a long time before you hit that stage, but you'll hit that stage too, where some of these guys who are your age and even sometimes younger, and you're building those relationships. So for me, it was meeting those people as a young reporter. That was really a thrill that I take away. I don't take for granted. Even today, I think about and remember if I see someone who might have passed away, I covered them, or I got a chance to interview them or meet them, and that's still a thrill.
Is there somebody, like, you talk about the growth of relationships from kind of like somebody that you're covering to maybe more of a peer friendship, something like that. Is there somebody like that kind of sticks out to you from what you've experienced in your journey?
You're talking about like somebody that I know now, or somebody that I met, or somebody back then?
Either way, just somebody that you feel like your relationship kind of grew from just being someone that covers them to like actually knowing them more so on a personal level.
I mean, on the Celtics side, I've become very close to Cedric Maxwell, who, in 1984, way before your time, he broke my heart because the Celtics beat the Lakers, and I was a huge Laker fan, and he was one of the pivotal players in that series. But I've grown to be very close to him in my 15 years with the Celtics. And he's older and all that, but we have great conversations. I have his cell number. That's the thing, good. Just, the thing is making good relationships, and, whether it be former players or, I'm good for, I talk sometimes, and, Ray Allen, I covered him in Seattle and in Boston. Paul Pierce. Even when, sometimes I'll see Shaq, and I was kind of a backup Lakers writer when he was with the Lakers. He remembered my face. I got the chance to see Kobe's first summer league game, and people don't remember, especially this new generation that's really gotten into Kobe, especially unfortunate since his passing, and have idolized Kobe, don't remember when he came out of high school, people had no idea how he was going to do. Like it was not like Victor Wembanyama. Like people think, oh, he was like Wemby. He was like this sensation, or LeBron. When LeBron was in high school, like everybody was like, yeah, he's going straight to the league. Like he's going to be a superstar. There's nobody that doubted that LeBron would be a superstar in the NBA, right? Now, playing 20 years and being a great, not that, but people had no doubt that he was going to be a superstar in the league, one of the league's great players, right? Kobe's a little different because he came out of a small, league in Philadelphia, suburban Philadelphia, and the video looked great of him in high school, but then again, it was high school kids. So I covered his first summer league game at Long Beach, California, when he was with the Lakers, and people were like, well, "What's he like? Who is this dude?" Like, because I mean, it's funny as it may seem, but people had no idea who he was. It was like, and I know his dad literally in the last week just passed away, but it was like, well, that's Joe Bryant's son. Oh, okay, because I remember Joe Bryant. When I was a kid, my father used to say he's a 6'9" point guard. Everybody thinks Magic was the first 6'9" point guard. Joe Bryant was the first revolution. Like he didn't get the credit, and he didn't have the career as Magic, obviously, but Joe Bryant was the first 6'9" dude who played point. And back then, and it's so traditional, basketball was so traditional when I grew up in those days. The big men stayed in the paint, the forwards played forward, and the guards were guards. There was no 6'9" guard. It was like, what are you doing? Get in the paint and shoot a hook shot, shoot a jumper, dunk on people. You're 6'9". You're not supposed to be handling the ball like a guard. So Magic, because of his skill set, was like the first one, but it was really Joe Bryant that was the first like 6'9" revolutionary, like the first, like people say Paul Gasol might have been like the first stretch four, right? The first point guard of that size was Joe Bryant. And so we didn't know anything about Kobe besides he looks like an athlete. He's mad confident. And so I got a chance to cover him that rookie season as a backup. That was like, now, and I said, I saw his first summer league game. I was interviewing him. I was there. He wasn't too much older than I was, younger than I was. And it was just amazing to see his athleticism. And it was just like, okay, that was good, but is this going to transfer to the league? And obviously, I was there the day when he shot the air balls. And, this is before your time, but they played the Utah Jazz in the first round of the playoffs, and Kobe took two really ill-advised jumpers and airballed them both. I was there in Salt Lake City, for that. So seeing like the beginning of these things is like it's just kind of immeasurable to talk about, because you're just like, you don't know you're being part of history. You don't know when you see a guy, because you see plenty of players come through, and some of them aren't good, some of them end up being stars. But to see like Kobe's first summer league game, to see him as an 18-year-old in the league, and it was an older league back then. He had grown-ass men in the league in the 90s like that. And him hang with him. He wasn't the superstar sensation as a rookie. I think he averaged 7 points a game as a rookie. And he backed up Eddie Jones, who was a very good player. People don't really talk a lot about Eddie Jones, guy at Temple. But once he got his shot, obviously he was the man. But that was something that stands out, is just like seeing the beginning of Kobe interviewing him. People were like, well, he should have just gone to UCLA. He's not ready for the NBA, because there was a heavy doubt about players who come from high school. There just was a doubt. Kevin Garnett was the first in 95 in 20 years, but he also was 6'11". Kobe was 6'6", and he was skilled, but it's like, well, we see that every day in the league. There's a lot of 6'6" dudes with crazy athleticism that never quite, Darius Miles, or, there's all these guys that Ricky Davis, ex-Cav, both those ex-Cavs. Like, there's a bunch of guys that were 6'6", 6'7", and just brimming with athleticism that end up being like, decent pros, but nothing special. But this guy, you saw it, but I could never say, oh, yeah, I knew he's going to be Hall of Famer. No, but it was fascinating to be able to cover his career, the beginning of it, from the infancy, the press conference, and just like, wow, like, damn, they drafted 18. This dude's 18. Like, this dude's fresh out of high school. This is crazy. Like, this ain't supposed to be like it. Now that's normal, right? But back then in the mid-'90s, 18-year-olds it was a grown man's league. These dudes used to party, club, drink. It was before social media, so it was a grown man's league. Video games were, people had, Madden and all that, but it's not like now where these dudes brought the systems with them and played in their hotels. Like, these dudes went out too, and they would get in the clubs that would let them in at 18. And I'm sure, like, these guys got story. All these guys who left early, believe me, you would see them out, and they were not 21. So it was a different league. It was a grown man's league. It was a Jordan league. And what I mean by that is players dressed like Jordan. If you I don't know if you watched that Last Dance, but you see how Jordan dressed. Like, that's how the rest of the league dressed. Like, Jordan was like, this is what you look like. So when guys got to the league, the veterans would go, we're going suit shopping. And you're going to get 5 suits. Like, there were no hoodies. There was no throwback jerseys. There was no baggy ass pants. There were no skinny jeans. There were none of this BS that some of these dudes wear, this whack stuff. Sometimes I don't get it, and that's an age thing. So you might think it's a good look, and understandably, I'm looking at some of these like, man, did you dress in the dark? What happened to you? But back then, it was a grown league, and Jordan set the tone. So if you talk to guys like Vince Carter, and you talk to those guys who entered around that time, the league was like, you dress up. You wear suits to the game, to the arena. This is how you look, because everybody followed Jordan. And then once Jordan retired, and then AI came in, and then that changed everything. The whole culture of the league changed. But the league in the 90s was a grown man's league. So to see Kobe be able to navigate that as best he could, and he obviously made some mistakes, was interesting to see that at the beginning.
I mean, you talk about all these stories, man. Like, this is what we get into the game for, right? And I'm a student of the game, obviously, as an early guy in this league, in this journalism game, and all those things. Like, you talk about me being too young to know about the Utah Jazz air balls with Kobe Bryant. Nah, I've seen those videos countless times, right? You go back, you study, you do your research. I also grew up a Kobe guy. Everybody's always like, what was your team? I didn't care what team I was a Kobe guy. So for the time being, I was a Lakers fan. But like, when it came to like, oh, who are you cheering for now? It's like, Kobe's not in the league. I don't care. I mean, I'm here to do work, right? But thinking about you talk about the Michael Jordan kind of dressing, and then Allen Iverson changing the league. And that's where this league is going and growing, right? And you've gotten to chronicle so much of the growth of this league, especially throughout your tenure, even before you were with the Boston Globe. I mean, you have the book now that comes out, or is already out, the Boston Celtics, an illustrated timeline. I mean, it's a great book that I think everybody should go read, even if you're not a Boston Celtics fan, because of the history of the game, right? But so your first year in Boston, the 2009-2010 season, the Celtics go all the way to the NBA Finals with Rajon Rondo, Paul Pierce, KG, and Ray Allen. Now, in your latest season, the Celtics won their first championship since 2008, which was led by that same group. What has the ride been like with the Celtics and just learning all the intricacies of the team and the roster and how this has changed over the years?
That's a good question. I guess I grew up a Laker fan. I had been to Boston for work. I'd never lived in Boston. I didn't know much about Boston when I got the job. So learning the organization, learning how they do things in Boston, learning the tradition of the organization. I knew they won all the championships, and Cousy and Russell, all that, and Cowens and Bird and McHale and Parrish. And I knew all that. But just how first class the organization is, how they are all about championships, because I covered the Clippers, which was not a first class organization. I covered the Sonics that were just trying to survive. Some of these organizations just trying to survive, trying to make the right moves, trying to figure it out, not getting the free agents they want, just trying to be competitive. That was what I was used to. So you go to Boston and you cover a team that's like 2 years removed from a championship. They're trying to get one more in that. And they were close. They didn't get that game 7. And I felt like, honestly, they gave away game 6, which basically was, to me, the biggest regret. They scored 67 points in game 6. They basically handed the game to the Lakers. And even though they were up 3-2 in the series, they lost it. But to see the organization that is all about trying to win championships, right? Signing the players, making the moves. It's interesting because not every organization is like that. Some organizations just want to be 500. They just want to make the playoffs, right? They don't want to spend the money, or their city is not attractive enough to attract major free agents. Boston was like that. A lot of black players didn't want to come to Boston. They had heard about things that happened to Bill Russell, or even more recently in the 90s, D. Brown got stopped and harassed by the cops during his time there. The slam dunk champion in 91, the guy who did this, covered his eyes. If the young people don't remember, look at that. And he covered his eyes, and he had the Reebok pumps. And I know y'all be laughing at that, like laughing at the Reebok pumps. And people thought that could make you jump higher. They were dudes, oh, yeah, it's give you more hops. So I don't think that worked. But Reebok, that was Reebok made a grip off of them shoes, because every dude was trying to pump up the things and dunk on everybody, because that was, it was going to make you jump higher, give you ups. So a lot of free agents didn't want to come to Boston. Eventually they did, starting with Al Horford, then Gordon Hayward. And so the organization is just been about winning. And it hasn't always worked. It didn't work for 15 years. They came up short. Obviously, the Cavs had a lot to do with that. After the Heat did, it was one guy. We all know who he is. He's in LA now, or he's in Paris, the Olympics. But LeBron prevented the Celtics from doing a lot. And so the Cavs and the Heat, when he was on the Heat, then he returned to the Cavs, as you know. And then before he went to the Lakers, they prevented that, but the Celtics kept plugging away. And it's just fascinating to be in an environment, in a city that demands championships. And Boston is a great city for professional sports. Like, they want you to win. There's no rebuilding, or if you're rebuilding, you better be onto something. We don't do, the Patriots, had a terrible year last year. They drafted a quarterback. People are expecting that they bounce back. Not the Super Bowl, but, they need to see 9-8. They want to see 9-8, 10-7. They want them to compete. Now, I don't think that's possible. I think they're going to struggle a little bit, but they got a new coach. They let Belichick go because it wasn't working anymore. The Red Sox, hey, when are they going to, they going to beat the Yankees? They're going to win the World Series? Like, people are out here demand excellence. And the Celtics, and I'm not a Celtic fan, and I didn't grow up a Celtic fan, they strive on excellence. and they haven't always made the right moves, but they've competed, and it's a pleasure to cover an organization that tries to win every year, because I've seen and been in organizations that they didn't. They were just trying to make it. The owner was just trying to make a couple of dollars. They didn't want to pay for this particular player. They didn't want to pay for this particular coach. They were too cheap or whatever, or it didn't work out. So that's been my journey, watching them try to get it, and then finally this year getting to the top.
You talk about being at the bottom, being in the mud, talk about getting to the mountaintop. You talk about the experience along the way as well, but also trying to be a part of an organization and a part of a team that is about winning majority beyond everything else, right? So you guys got 4 guys that are like the core 4 for you guys, and that's Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, and Derek White. How do you feel like those guys compare to the core 4 that the Celtics had back in the day? Rondo, Paul Pierce, KG, and Ray Allen.
A little different. Garnett and Allen came late in their careers, like relatively late. They were like early 30s when they got to Boston. So they had done everything individually, made all-star games and made all NBA teams, but they had never won. And Pierce was a guy who had resurrected his career. He was kind of considered a ball hog, not a real team guy, and the victim of a lot of losing teams. The Celtics tried to build around him and didn't necessarily put the right players around him. So that was a more veteran team. They were older, right? They were Rondo was the young guy in the group, but he had Kendrick Perkins on that team too. But they surrounded that team with a lot of veterans. That was an older team. This edition, they're all pretty much relatively younger, except Holiday's 33. I think about to be 34. But his kind of journey was like Garnett and Allen, where he comes toward the back 9 of his career. I don't know much longer he'll play, but I think his career is more than halfway over. Where Tatum and Brown were drafted, grew up in the organization. Derek White came over in like his 4th year, So it's a little different because those guys, Tatum and Brown, are homegrown. I mean, they were 19, 18 and a half, damn near maybe 19 when they got drafted. And they went through the perils of losing and making the playoffs, so very successful. They've all made the playoffs every year since they've been in Boston. There hasn't been a missed playoff by that duo, but just falling short. So for them to wait 7 and 8 years respectively to win a title, is just for them, it's more special. The group in 08, they won in their first year. It was, they got together and put it down on teams and were able to win that championship and obviously make another finals. But this group's a little younger, and it's probably was a little hungrier because they waited so long.
So obviously the Cavs and the Celtics had to cross paths this most previous year. They got into it in the Eastern Conference semifinals. It was the first time that the Cavs had been to the Eastern Conference semifinals without LeBron James since 1993, with LeBron 2018. So it was a long time coming for the Cavs. And obviously, like you said, for the Celtics, sometimes you got to face the big bag dog the last year and then face them again to see how they can grow in the next season. But obviously, both teams were dealing with injuries. The Celtics were without Kristaps Porzingis. The Cavs were without Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen. Donovan for the last 2 games, Jared Allen for the entirety of the series. What did you think about the Cavs' overall outlook when it came to how they matched up with the Celtics and what it could have potentially looked like if everybody was healthy on both sides of the ball?
I mean, obviously it didn't work because JB got fired, okay? I thought the Cavs were a quality team, not quite at that level, even with a healthy Mitchell and for that game, a healthy LeVert. I thought that the bench let them down. Like I didn't. Max Strus was not good. Georges Niang fell out of the rotation. They were really relying on Marcus Morris, who I really enjoyed covering in Boston. He was a great guy in Boston, and I hope he finds a spot, whether it be the Cavs or wherever, because I think he can still play ball. But I thought Cleveland was a couple of players short on the bench. And then missing Allen, that's such a factor. I thought Evan Mobley had a great series. Now he got his bag, so they put the faith in him. I think he's going to be a great player. He's just got to get his offense together, master that. And as much as the guy who I compare him with at times is Karl Malone, and obviously not a great guy off the court, but on the court, off the pick and roll, Malone learned how to shoot. He didn't come to the league knowing how to shoot. He was just a dude who could he was a freakish athlete who could take off and dunk on you, and he had the body of a god and all that, but he didn't know how to shoot. He learned, like Garnett too, and that might be another comparison. If I was Mobley, I'd probably call up KG if he hasn't and say, hey man, how do I learn how to shoot that 19, 18-footer off the pick and roll where teams got to respect that? Because I think that's his next step is offensively. I thought they were a quality team. I thought they went as far as they could. I don't know the dynamic between Donovan Mitchell and JB Bickerstaff, but obviously it didn't seem like it was going well. We'll see what Kenny Atkinson does as coach. It's just I think Cleveland's got to fortify its bench. I said Niang to me, and I don't have – it's hard to like have high regard for players who don't ever really get in shape. And Niang, as much as he can shoot the ball, and the minivan thing is I don't think that's a cool nickname to have when you're, an NBA player. Maybe, like the bus in football. Remember Jerome Bettis. But, I thought the bench let them down. And I think they, and I don't know what they're going to do with Okoro. Okoro's got to learn how to shoot consistently. I always like LeVert, but it just seems like he's hit a ceiling in his career. Like I think he was kind of on his way to stardom, and then he had the health issues, and he's shown flashes, but there just seems to be something not that's falling short with him. Garland's a guy who's crafty and creative, but I don't know how that backcourt works with Mitchell and him. And whether he wants out, we'll see. But I think the Cavs have a good team. We'll see what happens with Atkinson. Did they do anything in free agency? They didn't. They sign anybody outside? So, yeah, they just brought back, obviously, Mitchell and Mobley. So they gave them their money. But I just still think they're a player too short. And I just think that bench is just not reliable. They need another shooter. And I know you got Strus, and Strus just didn't have a good year last year. You can't have him shooting 34% from three. Like he's got to shoot 39, right? And he got 16 million, and that's a lot of money for a guy shooting 34%. So I think the Cavs will be okay, but I don't think they work themselves into that first tier or even second tier in the East, especially with the Sixers and the Knicks did.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be an uphill battle for them this coming season. I wanted to touch on some of the things that you talked about. I mean, when you talk about continuity and moves that have not been made for either side, really, in free agency, right? Like the Cavs only extended Donovan Mitchell, extended Evan Mobley, and they're still trying to wait on what they do with Isaac Okoro, whether they get him to play on the qualifying offer or if he stays on the sign-in trade. Becomes a sign-and-trade package piece. But then the Celtics extended Jayson Tatum, extended Derek White, extended Sam Hauser, re-signed Luke Cornett, re-signed Neemias Queta, I believe, and then re-signed Xavier Tillman, and then brought back Drew Peterson and J.D. Davidson on two-ways. So of teams that, really didn't make big moves when it comes to free agency, trade markets, these are one of the two teams. Obviously, the Celtics had the pedigree to win an NBA championship last year, and the Cavs are trying to get to that level. It's definitely, like you said, I like the comparison that you made with Evan Mobley and KG. I hadn't heard the Karl Malone one yet. That's a good one as well. But I really do think of KG as beginning his career as a defensive stopper, one of the best defenders in the entire NBA for majority of his career. And then you look at Evan Mobley, who came in as one of the best defensive players, probably top 10, top 5 defenders in the league right now. And you think about it, and because he's working on his three-point shot majority right now, right? Because last season the Cavs, when Evan Mobley and Darius Garland got injured, he was majority being pushed to work on his three-point shot because that's what they were relying on to get back the offense that they were losing when those two were out. Now it's to the point where I like your conversation of the mid-range more so than the three-point shot, because obviously as a big man going from shooting and being poor from 5 feet and out to being extended all the way out to the three-point line is a big drastic change rather than moving to the mid-range, which is more doable. But it feels like they feel like if they can extend his shot to the furthest amount, like the maximum, then they'll be able to space the floor more and those kinds of things, which is obviously important. But even the mid-range game, as you mentioned, will do that. I just think it's interesting when you talk about roster construction and the bench and what they need, right? And they don't call George Niang the minivan in Cleveland anymore, thank goodness. They call him the G-Wagon for some odd reason. But he's definitely a guy that we feel like we needed more from this season, right? Like as reporters, he wasn't doing what you paid him for. Like Donovan Mitchell last offseason went out and said, all right, here are the guys that I want. Here's my wish list. I give you George Niang, I give you Max Strus, I give you Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome played 2 games in the entire regular season. Max Strus was one of the most impactful players on the Cavs, but he couldn't shoot the lights out for the ball like he used to. George Niang played 82 games in the regular season, but was played off the court defensively when he was on the floor in the playoffs, right? So the Cavs obviously feel like, and the Cavs organization feel like they have the guys on the roster to get the job done or get to the playoffs, which is like the minimum, bare minimum at this point. But it's to the point where they're hoping at this point if those guys are going to be able to perform when it comes time for the playoffs and see if they have a better season rather than assuming the worst and thinking that they might have plateaued and that is their high standard. So when it comes to thought process of organizations, how have you seen over your career, like how organizations, especially the Celtics, have looked at players when they have a down year and hoping that they come back and have a better season?
Yeah, you have to put faith that player puts in the work and is able to have a bounce back season. If not, you might have to make a move. But when you commit that money to these contracts, and other teams aren't silly, they're going to trade you their bad deal for your bad deal. So if you want to move Niang, you're going to have to take back somebody who probably didn't do better as well where he came from. That's how this league is. Or you have to cultivate and find your two-way players or your draft picks in order to take those spots and to play productive basketball. When you've invested your money in Mobley and Mitchell, and you also a couple of years ago you paid Garland and Jared Allen, so your core 4 is paid for, right? So you're going to have to, as the Cavs, and I don't think they're a second apron team. I think they're a first apron team, are going to have to be crafty in how you build the rest of your roster, whether it be the mid-level exception, whether it be grabbing a player on a minimum deal who's on a 1-year deal, just like Milwaukee did with Gary Trent Jr., who apparently was looking for like $25 million a year and got the veterans minimum from Milwaukee because he waited too long. The free agent market still has some quality players in it, guys who are getting passed up. And that's the thing about this current NBA market. There really is not a big middle class. So the middle class gets screwed out. The middle class becomes a lower class, and you got guys who are now trying to get veteran minimums because they don't want to just get training camp invites. They want a guaranteed deal. The Celtics have like two guys like that, O'Shea Brissett, who opted out of his deal thinking, oh, I'll get more money and more time somewhere else, and he hasn't. And we're a month into free agency almost. And then Svi Mihalik, who was just a free agent, and he's looking for work too. So the Cavs might have to get crafty in signing some of these free agents and promise them playing time. Or, you take a chance and bring back a Marcus Morris. I'm sure he'll want a guaranteed deal because he's 35 now. Sorry, I think he's 35. He's not playing for no non-guaranteed deal. He wants a guaranteed deal or whatever. And I'm sure he'll come back because he wants to play and he wants a role and he wants a deal. So you might have to get crafty. You might have to take chances on certain guys with some stripes, with some some tread in their tires, or some guys who haven't been great in other places and hope that they flourish. That's kind of how I have to build a roster in today's NBA with the second apron, and there's so many penalties for high spending. And, Cleveland is not a great free agent destination, but a chance to win and a role, you can get a quality player still.
I mean, I feel like I agree with you. I wish the free agency class was a little bit stronger, or if the Cavs didn't wait as long to make any moves as they have. Like you said, we're a month in. Unfortunately for the Cavs, Marcus Morris Sr. opened his mouth on the radio in Cleveland and was kind of bashing Jarrett Allen, who they think they want to build around. Obviously, Jarrett is actually on contract through 2025-26, so they might have to figure out an extension for him. And if he doesn't go this offseason, then Marcus Morris Sr. being in the same room as Jarrett Allen after all the smack that he talked on the airways is it's a low-quality chance, if I would say so. But I do think that those are the type of guys that they're looking for, right? Somebody with a little bit more passion, somebody with a little bit more edge. Tristan Thompson has been posting on his social media about trying to get jobs out there and do those kinds of things, all the workouts he's been doing, even with Darius Garland. So that's an edge as well. But I think right now, like, the best option for the Cavs is obviously going and doing a sign and trade with Isaac Okoro, because you think you get more upside with somebody that's got a little bit more experience, somebody that has more experience in the playoffs, rather than going on with the guy that is a great defensive player, probably the best perimeter defender that the Cavs have on the team, especially when you talk about point of attack defending, but hasn't been able to come through. I believe he shot like 25% from three on shots that he was open on in the playoffs. So that's something that you need, especially when you're a guy that is known for defense and then also being a 3 and D guy as well. But I kind of wanted to go back to the playoffs this past season and talk a little bit about the championship run that you guys had. Obviously, you guys beat the Dallas Mavericks and had to face them in a tough series that ultimately ended up in 5, the same that it did in almost every other series. But the Jayson Tatum thing, right? We talked about Kobe Bryant and being guys that enjoyed his game, enjoyed his presence. What did you think of how Jayson Tatum celebrated the championship by seemingly mimicking Kobe Bryant's picture with the Larry O'Brien trophy and doing the we did it scream as KG did? As the kids are saying now, he lost some aura with those performances after winning the championship. What were your thoughts on how he responded?
I can't really point out or can't really say how a guy should react. Like, KG said anything is possible. Jayson said we did it. I don't think that's a bad reaction to a championship. I don't think there is a bad reaction to a championship. I think this NBA community is so hard on some of these young guys, in terms of what they say and what they do and how they react to certain things. I thought Jayson was fine. He hugged his son. He walked around. He had finally gotten the monkey off his back. People had blamed him a lot for what had gone on in previous years, or said, we don't know if you're good enough to win a championship. He had waited 7 years. He's 26. He had all the personal accolades, Olympic team, all NBA first team and all that, and just had never won a title. And now he's a champion. And so he can react how he wants to react. I don't have a problem with that. I think this NBA community just seeks things to criticize. And I think that's really unfair, and why these guys are so guarded sometimes with the media, because they feel like anything they say it's going to be critical and criticized by people who are, just throwing out, just want to be. I just think we seek some of these folks seek so much. They just want to be acknowledged. They want their NBA opinions to be listened to. They don't mind saying nasty ass things and unnecessary things to get attention. And that's just the thing of it. It's just so I don't put no credence in his reaction. He reacted how he wanted to react. That's fine. He won a championship. He can say anything he wants. He's a champion. You can't take that away from him. So I didn't too much take that, and we did it. I mean, it wasn't like he went on ABC and started cursing and he didn't do anything classless. He did, all of what he did I thought was fine. I just said before, I think the social media era, everybody's a tough guy. Everybody says things that they would never say in your face. And everybody wants attention. And they want regard, and they want you. And instead of just saying, hey, this is my opinion, you say it without any class, and you think that's funny. Or, yeah, I showed you, or it's just unfair. I think that's one of the sad part about this NBA time right now is some of the things said on social media and how hard these guys get scrutinized.
Gary, I got two more questions for you, and then we'll wrap up and we'll get out of here. So, the first one is, it feels like you are always the odd man out when it comes to votes, right? In 2013, when there was the MVP voting, you were the only person that voted for Carmelo Anthony. Everybody else voted for LeBron James. This season, you were one of very few to have voted Jayson Tatum as Finals MVP over Jaylen Brown. What goes into your head?
7-4, yeah, it was 7-4.
Yeah, well, not the only person this year, but it was.
But yeah, no, you're right.
So what goes through your head when you're putting these votes down and through and trying to decide between guys, especially when we look back at a decision like LeBron and Carmelo?
Oh boy. The LeBron thing and the Carmelo thing, it's been 11 years, and I've read so many mistruths about me knowing all of everybody voted, and I just no, I'm a vote. I had no idea how anybody else was going to vote. And if you look at the 2013 season, the MVP candidates were LeBron, Carmelo, Chris Paul, Kobe. It was 11 years ago, right? So it seems like light years ago, but a different generation. I voted for Carmelo because I had seen him 4 times with the New York Knicks, because they played the Celtics, obviously, and they're in the same division. And I just thought the Knicks would have been a terrible team without him. I thought he carried them that year. And they won the Atlantic Division for the first time in 19 years. He averaged 29, 7, and 6. He scored 50 on the Heat. I think the Knicks beat the Heat 3 times that year. His individual games, he had a 50-point game, then he followed that with a 40-point game. He literally carried the Knicks. And if you look at that Knicks roster in 13, it was a geriatric ward, man. It was Jason Kidd and Tyson Chandler and Marcus Camby. It was a lot of old guys in that team. And Melo put that team on his back, because if you remember, Amari Stoudemire and him were supposed to be this dynamic duo, and Amari Stoudemire never got quite healthy, unfortunately, for the Knicks. His knees never cooperated. He didn't get a chance we didn't see Phoenix Amari in New York, right? So that was my vote. People argue against me. I don't mind. If you feel like LeBron's MVP, I'm glad, he deserved the award. My whole vote thing was, that's who I voted for. I wasn't, and people, you hate LeBron. I don't hate LeBron. I voted LeBron MVP in years he did win, and I voted LeBron MVPs years he didn't win. People just don't look that up. And no, I did not know how everybody voted before I voted. we as reporters, and you should know this, Ethan, you don't call all the reporters and go, how did you vote? You might call 2 or 3 guys of the 100 or 90, and you say, but you don't. That's 90 now. I think it's 99 people or 100 people that vote. Like, you're not making those calls. You're not sending that big of a group text. You're not, and everybody ain't gonna tell you how they voted. So for people to think that I knew that he was one vote short, and I was like, nah, man, I hate man. He hit, he put my Celtics out the playoffs. One, I'm not a Celtic fan. Okay, I'm not a Celtic fan. I cover the Celtics. If he put him out the playoffs, he did because he's a great player. Like, I don't hold that against him. I don't hold players being great against them. That's what they're supposed to do. LeBron's a great player. He played great. Well, how am I going to hold that against them? The Celtics weren't good enough to beat the Heat. They weren't. LeBron and Wade and Bosh were special. Like, that's what they're supposed to do. Like, I'm not saying take it for granted, but like, why would I hold that against LeBron, that he's an amazing player, or that, I mean, I'm grown ass man. I don't take, you hurt me, my ball team I cover. You, like, no, I'm not a kid. So that, like, the whole thing is absurd when people, oh, you're a Celtic, it was Boston and you held it against LeBron. Like, if I'm such a Boston guy, I voted for a New York guy. Like, that's what people think. Like, Boston and New York got kind of a rivalry in everything. So if I was that much of Boston and I wanted to hold it, I would not have voted for a New York guy. So all the things, it's funny. And I still get tweets and people still sending me notes 11 years later and want me to explain. And it's not that hard to explain. That's who I thought won the MVP. If you look at what the Knicks did that one particular year, Carmelo was the best player on his team. He was the most valuable player on his team. LeBron still had Bosh and Wade, 2 guys who are in the freaking Hall of Fame, right? In their prime. Okay. So as much as LeBron's a great player and he won the award, as far as I saw, he won the award. There was a ceremony. He took it home. It's in his living room or his mantle or his trophy room in LA. So it is what it is. Like, I don't feel bad about it, but people think that I got something against LeBron. No. I've held it against him. No. I'm mad because he knocked the Celtics to the playoffs. No. I mean, whatever. Like, it's funny. If you look at Carmelo's numbers that year, you look at his scoring, and you look at that roster he played on, then I think people might understand more.
And to the Jaylen Brown over Jayson Tatum, or Jayson Tatum over Jaylen Brown point?
Tatum, I thought he had the game, 31, 8, and 11 in the closeout game. I think he carried them home. I didn't have a problem with Jaylen winning. His defense on Luka changed the series and gave the Celtics the advantage. Nobody was really great offensive. The Celtics did not play a great offensive series in the finals. They played better than the Mavs. They played great defense. Defense won that series. They were not good from the 3-point line. They were not great offensively in that series. So to sit, it was 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. I didn't have a problem with Jaylen winning at all. I voted for Jaylen for the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. So, but I just thought Tatum kind of having his signature moment, 31, 8, and 11, and just carrying them when the Mavs in Game 5 were trying to make little runs, and Jayson was like, no, I got this, and he scored. And he carried him, and he took it from him in the third quarter. I thought that put him over the top, but obviously Jaylen's defense was great.
And obviously you were in France. You were covering the Olympics. There was some controversy when Derek White was announced as the replacement for Kawhi Leonard over Jaylen Brown, Donovan Mitchell, whoever you want to name. What did you think about the decision to go with Derek White, and what happened on social media with Jaylen Brown kind of asking questions about why he wasn't selected?
I don't think there's a problem with Derek White. I think Derek White deserves to be on the team. I think Jaylen Brown has a problem with the process itself. I think he feels like he's being disrespected. I do agree with him in that sense. He's the NBA Finals MVP, Each Conference Finals MVP. He got no sniffs for Team USA. They invited Kawhi. I think everybody saw that and goes, really, you're going to invite Kawhi. Kawhi missed most of the Dallas series with a knee injury. He's just going to suddenly be better and be ready for Team USA. Everybody thought that was a weird choice. And I just think you had to be realistic. I think everybody kind of predicted that Kawhi probably wouldn't make it through this process. He didn't. So you don't give Jaylen a call then. Then you have someone before Kawhi. Okay, you want to give Kawhi a shot. And then you have his position open again, and you call Derek White. I think Jaylen has a problem with the process. I think he feels like it's political. I tend to agree with him. He is a person who has strong political beliefs, strong social issues, beliefs in social issues. Do you want him on the stage in Paris, saying potentially controversial things? I think all of that, the Nike thing, he's not a Nike guy. He's a shoe free agent. So he wears whatever the hell he wants. Sometimes he wears Nikes. Mostly he wears Kobe's. So that's his shoe. But he's not a Nike guy. He's not tripping about a shoe contract. I think there were some political things that happened. And for people to think that doesn't happen, it does, especially on the women's side. I'm not even talking about Caitlin Clark and all that. Even in 2016, when Candace Parker, I think, was a WNBA MVP and did not make the Rio team, Gina Oriema passed her up. That was politics. So I think politics did play a part. I think Jaylen had a right to be upset. Now, could he have handled it better? Probably. He said he called Derek White and smoothed everything out. We'll talk to Derek about that stuff this week. But for me, I thought he had a legitimate gripe. I can't speak for your generation of everything's like social media, like the meme, the emoji with the hat. I don't know what that means. Like, I wish, just write it out. Write it down. Because I don't know what some of these emojis mean. And it's like, I got to ask somebody, what does that mean? And what you trying to say? Instead of just writing it. I don't agree with being left off the team. That's it. Or saying
next time you got a question about emojis or something, you hit me up. We'll figure it out.
I'll hit you up, Ethan, because some of that, the one with the baseball cap, like, what does that mean, man? Like, what? Like, it's a cap. What's a cap? Like, what is that? Like, some of these youngsters, these emojis, and then they write in all caps. Like, why are you writing in caps? Why are you yelling? Because that's basically you yelling in diction. Why are you yelling, man? I hear you. You ain't got to write in caps. But whatever. I thought Jaylen could have handled it better. I understand him being upset. Hopefully it's smoothed out. And hopefully for him, he'll use it as a motivation for next season.
Quick one to end the podcast. What's your favorite series between the Celtics and Cavs that you've covered?
Favorite series? Wow. That's a tough one. Some of the ones in 17 and 18, like Isaiah Thomas was hurt, and then they gave up Game 7. They went 7 for 39 in 18 with a young Tatum and Brown. The most surprising was the one that sent LeBron to Miami. I would probably say that. When they whipped with behind rail and they whipped Cleveland in Game 5, and I think Cleveland kind of gave up in that series, and that was hard to watch. The Cavs felt like they had the Celtics, and then they, it was 2-2, and then they went to Cleveland, and the Celtics just put it on them, and then and they put up a fight in Game 6, but it wasn't enough in 2010. I thought probably that was the most surprising series between the two teams. The 17 and 18 series were enjoyable. You wanted to see both teams play their best ball, and I thought the Celtics didn't play their best ball in that Game 7. That was a disappointing part for them, that 7 for 39, and I think losing, I think they lost 82-79 or 87-79, I want to say. But that was a great game from Jeff Green. And obviously, they all went to the finals and then losing to the Warriors. But, there's a lot of good series there.
Well, Gary, I appreciate you taking the time, and I know some Cavs fans are going to have some PTSD when listening to this podcast, talking about all the Cavs and Celtics arguments and runs, but I truly do appreciate all the time that you took and the knowledge that you gave, and some of the youngsters, hopefully they do their research when they listen to this podcast so they don't have to ask so many questions in the comments. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris and me by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me and Chris. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.